been playing around with Linux for actually late 92, early 93 for about a year before I decided it was to the point where it actually had everything that I needed to really replace the Sun workstation. And I was looking for a way to have a Unix workstation at home. At the time, we used Sun SPARC stations in the office at Stanford. Those machines cost us about $7,000. Now, I desperately wanted a Unix machine at home. There's always this thought you get as a graduate student, gee, if I could work at home, then I would be so much more productive. I would graduate sooner because I would finish my thesis sooner. Well, is it true? Well, you can judge, you know. Most people end up spending a lot of their time becoming more productive so that if they ever actually worked on their thesis, they'd finish it in a day. It takes a while sometimes. So I decided I wanted a Unix machine at home. And I went out there and was able to use Linux together with a PC. For about $2,000, I put together a system that was 1.5 to 2 times faster than that $7,000 Sun SPARC station. That was absolutely amazing. I had 1.5 to 2 times the speed at 1/3 to 1/4 the price. Light bulbs went off. I knew there was an opportunity here. This was a chance to really do something better than what Sun has done.
I got involved in fall '93 because I was sent a copy of the first CD-ROM commercial Linux distribution, which was called Yggdrasil. It was produced by Adam Richter. And I got a copy because I had been myself writing free software for a long time, since the early '80s. I was actually one of the early GNU contributors myself. And I was absolutely astonished. I was completely astonished because I'd been a software engineer for nearly 15 years at that point, and according to all the rules I knew about controlling complexity, keeping your project groups small, having closely managed objectives, Linux should have been a disaster, and it wasn't. Instead, it was something wonderful, and I was determined to figure out how they were getting away with that.
In order for Linux to grow beyond the world of the computer programmer, it needed a use, an application that made it a must-have technology. That threshold was crossed with the development of a program that made complex websites possible. That program is the Apache Web Server.
The killer app of Linux was undoubtedly the Apache Web Server. If you look at the history of Linux, the adoption curve of Linux and the adoption curve of the Internet exactly track each other. 1993, which was when the Apache Web Server project really got started, was also the beginnings of the popular ISP explosion, when the Internet first became a mass-market commodity and the idea of web-based electronic commerce and mass communication became real.
I think it was one of the first applications that caused people to go, wow, if I install Linux, I get some tangible benefit from doing so, right? I mean, clearly there were a lot of interesting applications on Linux at the time, this being maybe 2 or 3 years ago when this thing really started to take off. But there wasn't a driving, you know, you could almost say business case for someone to use Linux versus using NT until, I think, Apache. And a lot of the things that plugged into Apache and enhanced Apache. I mean, when you went to go out and build a server farm, it was much more cost-effective, real dollar terms, to build it on Linux and Apache than it was to build it on IIS and NT, even if it meant that you had to spend a little bit of money to train your staff to learn how to use that or to find people who were knowledgeable. But the good news was that that knowledge wasn't very expensive because there are all these college students out there who had been using Linux for a long time and were very familiar with it.
If you look at the trend curves in web servers, Apache has steadily been gaining in market share ever since. It's up to something like 66% now. It's steadily clobbered all of the closed source competition. And that's because it's more reliable, it's more flexible, it's more extensible. It does what webmasters actually need. And the combination of Apache and Linux found its way into a great many commercial shops.
Essentially, Apache became the application that motivated internet service providers and e-commerce companies to choose Linux over Microsoft's Windows.
It would probably run best on Linux and on FreeBSD. And the reason is the communities around those operating systems are also the communities that contribute the most back to Apache, right? And they were also the operating systems that internet service providers started using very heavily as well. And internet service providers really liked Apache because it allowed them to do a lot of different things that some of the commercial web servers didn't, such as the ability to host more than one website on a single box, which clearly if you're an ISP and you have 40,000 users and they all want their own website,